Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about the relationship between habits and happiness. Stopping self-destructive habits gives us more time, insight, and energy to improve our lives. Join us as we share what habits we've been working on and the impact it's had on our lives this month. Listeners, today we're discussing Chapter 4 in our Happy School book. And if this is the first time you're listening to us, or if you feel like, I missed out on Chapters 1 through 3, no worries. If you're new to this series, you do not need to be reading the book to follow along. You can jump in at any time because basically it's just us reading a book and then sharing about how we have applied it the last month. You really do not need to be reading the book to follow along. But we are doing one episode a month on each chapter. So this is our 4th month, and so we're on Chapter 4, and this chapter discusses getting rid of bad habits. And each chapter in this book is leading us to the subtitle of the book, which is Where Women Learn the Secrets to Overcome Discouragement and Worry. So every single chapter, one episode a month, you can be following along with us, and supposedly by the end, you will have learned the secrets to overcome discouragement and worry. However, there's a caveat with that, Mindy and Julie. It's like you will have learned them. It doesn't necessarily mean you will have applied them.
Right. And she mentions that mastery takes years. Like you won't just read this book and say, "Oh, I've got it all figured out." Like that'll be the starting point. You know, it can take years. I think she said to master anything, it takes at least 5 years.
Oh, wow!
Like if you're playing the piano or whatever you're doing, if you're learning something new. Don't be too hard on yourself if you struggle with it, because that's just part of learning.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Just yesterday I was thinking, I've really put this book to practice each month. It has hit my life at exactly a perfect time. But even yesterday I was evaluating the day before, the week before. I tend to do that like on a Monday morning, and how can I, live this week better? What do I need to change? And it's so like these things I'm trying to incorporate. So the things that we've learned so far, I had to tell myself yesterday, it's about recovering faster. We've talked about that. Like it's not so much that you're not going to go back and, make bad choices or allow negative thoughts to kind of rule your day or whatever. But it's about recovering and then putting back into practice. So that's what I kind of had to tell myself yesterday. It was like, okay, but I know what to do. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Stop now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just want to say here, for somebody who doesn't like to read self-help books, Mindy, you have a lot of good practices.
Julie.
You do.
You are so kind. It's so funny.
We've read probably 3 or 4 self-help books through this podcast, Mindy, and I remember in our earliest episodes, you said that's, one of your things is you don't like self-help books, but it seems like you get a lot out of them.
Of my bane of my existence. All right. I will say there's some things that over time, just studying human behavior has always been of interest to me. So there were some things that I was telling Bryce, I was like, oh my gosh, listen to this. And Bryce would be like, it sounds like you could have written that. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you for that very much. But I feel like I am definitely learning so much.
That's great. That's really good. So listeners, if you do not like self-help books, you can be encouraged by the fact that Mindy is really applying this one. She's getting a lot out of it. So
yes, I do love it. Mm-hmm.
Right from the beginning of the month, Mindy said that this was her favorite chapter, the urgent necessity of stopping bad habits and how to do it. And so, Mindy, I can't wait to hear what you have worked on all month. But the author, she said that she put this chapter early in the book because you have to stop self-destructive habits before other issues can be addressed. If you stop these habits, then you will have more time, insight, and energy to improve your life. And the author, which I should mention her name, it's Julie Gordon, the author deems a bad habit to be any behavior that harms you and is indulged in for one of 2 reasons, and only 2. And I thought this was interesting, listeners. Really, our bad habits can fall into one of these 2 categories: for pleasure or for dialing down emotional disturbances. Let's just let that sit for a minute because I had to go back and underline that. We either do something that is bad for us for pleasure, or to dial down emotional disturbances. And did you guys find that to be true in your life?
Yeah. We'll talk about this later on, but I thought that was really interesting, the pleasure part.
Right.
Because it doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but learning that all fulfillment doesn't come from just pleasure and escape, that was kind of profound for me. Like we'll hit on that later, but and then the dialing down emotional disturbances, like, yes, sometimes you need self-soothing, but does it have to be with something bad? So
I totally 100% agreed with this. I do know that whether I choose to do a bad habit because of one of those two reasons, it hits different if it's for pleasure than if it's for the emotional disturbance that I'm trying to mask. And so the recovery is harder. Like the mountain feels bigger when it's for that emotional comfort.
Sure.
And so that's the part. It's like, oh, okay, if it's just for pleasure, then I need to just swap that out with another pleasurable activity that's better for me. And for some reason that seems easier to handle, but the emotional part, oh my gosh, like that's the part. It's like, no, I need this so I can feel better and not think about that or whatever it is. So
yeah. Well, were you made aware of some bad habits in your life this month?
Well, again, I'm so thankful that this was during January, because I was already evaluating kind of where I was coming off the holidays, feeling like there was no routine, no schedule, no whatever. And so this coupled along with starting a new year, I had already seen that I was already aware that my self-discipline, self-control was at an all-time low, and it tends to be during that season. So I think that part of me was like, look, just give yourself some grace. It is what it is. Get through it, and then recover. But this particular chapter gave me a practical exercise, and that's what I thought was different. The previous 3 chapters were so mental. And I told you I felt like a mental case, trying to stop my thoughts and watch the parade and things like that. And so this hit me in a very practical level of tell me what to do, give me a step-by-step process. And I did it. I was like, I am the student.
I'm like you, Mindy. This time of year makes me think about reevaluating, my life. And then just with all that we're going through, I've kind of excused a lot of bad habits. Like, well, look where I am. Like, life is pretty terrible. So I'm okay with these things. I deserve these things. And it just let me reevaluate that, if something seems good, but in the end is not, then it's really not a help. It's really not a friend. And she said it's more of a thief than anything. So just kind of seeing it in that light really can pretty easily transform the way you, if you change the way you see it, your body will follow.
Yeah. As an example to listeners, like one of the bad habits that I have, but it's not a habit that I want to eliminate completely, but I do know that I should dial it back, but was scrolling through social media mindlessly to avoid moving on to a task. It's like I pull in the garage and I don't really want to unload the groceries, so let me just check Facebook, Instagram, email, I don't want to get out and unload the groceries. And then that's going to make me have to look at those leftovers in the refrigerator and make a decision because I'm going to have to throw those out to make room. Like and it's not even like these are huge tasks. I don't want to do them,
Right.
Or
it's like, how long can I stay in this car?
Yes. And then, maybe I have finished lunch and I don't want to get up and move on to the next task. So let me just scroll through social media a little bit and then put that off a little longer. Oh, well, I can sit here at least until I've finished my drink. Okay. Oh, well, I didn't have dessert yet. Okay. Well, it's just putting off. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't think I used to have, I don't know, maybe I did and I used other things, but I find myself getting stopped between tasks. Like, I don't want to go on to the next one. Like, I'm avoiding it. And it's not even like I'm avoiding like a bad task. I just am finding it hard to move. Do you guys relate to that at all?
Absolutely. Like the avoidance issues, I definitely have seen in my life where I'm lazier now in some aspects than I was before, but also more productive in other ways. But I do think about, what did I do with my free time before I had a phone that I could easily be distracted by? And so I can't even think about what I would do, but especially it hits hard at night where it's still dark outside. It's cold. I've still got 2 hours before I go to bed. Dinner is done. It's cleaned up. I've made my coffee for the next day, and I'm tired, but I can't go to sleep yet because I can't go to bed at 7:00 or 7:30 at night. You know what I mean? And it's like,
you'll be up at 4.
I have no interest in cleaning, working on any type of self-help. I don't want to think about anything. Like, it's just like that time period is hard. I don't even know what to put there.
And if you put social media there, it'll be midnight when you look up.
And it is definitely easier to put something there when the time changes because, it's still light out and it's still warm. Well, I could go for a walk or I could, but in the winter time in particular, you can get stuck. You're feeling too cold to get up and move around. Yeah. It's so cozy where you are.
It is. Marie, it's so cozy.
I'm just laughing thinking about what the lower self is going to say to us when she talks about that later.
That lower self.
Yeah.
And honestly, I am probably engaging in that habit for both reasons. It probably starts out as pleasure. Like, I'm eating a snack and let me catch up. Then I inevitably see something that, whether I acknowledge it or not, probably emotionally disturbs me. A news story, a post, a something. So now I'm just trying to get through the emotional bothersomeness of it by continuing to mindlessly scroll. And I don't even name to myself what actually bothered me because I may not even really be aware of it. And it's just like, I'm really doing it for both reasons. Like, it started out as one and then it turns to the other.
Bad habits really do soften life. Like, they help us escape from what's missing and disappointed. That's a term that came up in a previous chapter. And they really do provide pleasure. I mean, they work, but they can also do harm too. And like, the thing that I'm struggling with now is just the way I'm eating. And I've eaten really well and been in control for 7 years. And now I kind of have fallen off the wagon. And and I've used the excuse of where I am in life, that it's okay. That, it's one of the few pleasures I have left in life, or this won't hurt me, or I deserve it, or, and it does make you happy to eat comfortable, junky food, but there's always a cost later on. So
that's where I'm at, Julie, is last year I could easily have a really great excuse as to why I was letting certain good habits go and allowing more comfort things to come into my life. I was like, well, we're about to move. The kids are changing school. Abby's getting married. And then when we moved here, it was like, well, I can't deal with that right now because I just need to be happy in this area because I'm dealing with so much in these other areas. It was like, it was too much, but at some point you get really sick of yourself and you're like, I do not feel good. And this is not good for me, nor is it healthy for me. And some of the things in this chapter is just the self-discipline, looking at those harmful habits as detrimental, as being what they are, not comfort, but harmful. I underlined this, but she said, you cannot be indulging in harmful behavior and expect to be happy. And I've seen that in my own life. I'm like, yes, you're absolutely right. And then the next thing that I underlined, few things cause more emotional turmoil in one's brain than continuing bad habits against one's own better judgment. And so, but I don't think that you can deal with a bad habit until you've seen that fruition in your life and realized that it's become a harmful behavior.
Right.
You have to realize it's damaging before you're willing to really kind of look at it and deal with it.
We've touched a little bit on some of these, but what are the lies of self-indulgence? Like, what kinds of things do we tell ourselves? I know that I say, like, I deserve it, or everybody does it, or so-and-so does it a lot worse than I do.
Yeah, it's only one. It's not a big deal. That it's not a big deal was the one thing that I noticed my brain went to more often than anything this month. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's just this once.
Right. Yeah.
I think the lie that I believe is, that it does work. And you just have to realize, okay, but when does it stop working? Like, yes, it works immediately, but she said, there's strings attached. There's a cost later. And like with unhealthy eating, the obvious one is weight gain, poor health, not feeling your best. But there's also the emotional part, like you get disgusted with yourself. Yeah. You regret it later. And that's not good, emotionally to be feeling that way. And then this was pretty profound for me, like I mentioned earlier, that the lie that fulfillment only comes from pleasure and ease and comfort. And then when you don't have that, that's pretty disturbing. Like, yes, it's nice to have, I'm not saying that pleasure is wrong. Like, yes, it's nice. We all love it. But real deep fulfillment in life comes from other meaningful things, like relationships with the Lord and with other people and from work. And it just is really helpful to say, hey, brownie, you're not my ultimate fulfillment. Yes, you taste good. Right. But that's really not where my fulfillment comes in, Yep.
And it's masking the bigger problem, and then if you continue to engage in harmful behavior, when you've recognized that it's a problem, when you continue to do that, it just causes depression because you're not listening to the healthy person. You're not listening to the healthy Julie. Right. The one saying this is not good. And you're like, but I need comfort right now.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, do you guys really believe that you can conquer your bad habits?
I do believe that you can, but I believe that you'll continue to battle bad habits the rest of your life also.
Right. I guess I take the question more literally. Do you really believe that you can conquer your bad habits?
I do, because I have in the past.
Okay, good.
I've been through a health journey. So with me, when I run to food for comfort, I recognize that, and I've defeated it before for long periods of time. And it's still one of those things that I have to recognize is a comfort to me. And I'll tell myself, well, I'm not drinking, I'm not smoking, I'm not doing things that, I'm doing the legal, acceptable way to indulge or to mask. It's acceptable. Like people joke about it all the time. But if you've recognized that as something that's harmful to you, then that's sin in your life. Like, and I know that sounds really harsh, but that's what it is.
You're right. Like during COVID, a lot more became acceptable, binge watching Netflix, not getting out of your pajamas, eating and all day. And
And to be perfectly honest, as soon as you start engaging in self-discipline or self-control in your life, you don't have to say a word. It will rub some people wrong, and it's not acceptable in our culture to engage in self-discipline or self-control because other people are uncomfortable with that sometimes. And so you have to be willing to disappoint not only yourself in the time that you want it, but also to not necessarily always be encouraged in it by other people.
That's really true, because it's like you're not as fun to be around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
If you don't get the dessert or you don't want to do this or that, it's like somehow your abstaining is affecting everyone else's happiness, which I've never really understood. But
well, Julie, let's narrow in on that word abstaining, because we talked about in our notes for this episode how maybe we would talk a little bit about abstainers versus moderators. And I looked up the definition for listeners. An abstainer decides one time that something is off limits, and that's it. The temptation is gone. Moderators, on the contrary, find that occasional indulgences can increase their pleasure and strengthen their resolve to avoid the temptation the rest of the time. And there's no right or wrong way, Mindy, but I wonder if the pushback that you sense is really the ongoing tension between moderators and abstainers, because if moderators try to abstain, they feel trapped and rebellious. And if abstainers try to moderate, they spend a lot of precious energy justifying why they should just go ahead and indulge. So if someone comes up to me because I am a moderator and they say, I'm not eating any more sugar, I immediately feel judged for not eliminating sugar. And I immediately think to myself, well, that's just a disaster waiting to happen, because nobody can just cut something out of their life. And why would you do that? Like, can't you just learn to moderate it? And the abstainer, if I say, well, I'm going to moderate this thing in my life, like I'm going to allow myself some of something and not just go crazy on it, the abstainer is saying, well, I think you're probably secretly going crazy on it, and you're just telling us that you're moderating, or that's not even a realistic way to live. Like, I think maybe the tension comes from the way that people approach even indulging in things that are, in quotes, bad, because almost nothing is bad in moderation. Spoken like a true moderator. That's me.
Sounds great, Marie.
But I wonder if the tension comes from that. What do you guys think?
I could see it partly coming from that. At the same time, I am an abstainer, and I have tried to live like a moderator, and I cannot. It does not last. It's not my natural bent. And so there's different ways that you can moderate or abstain. To me, I'm not of you. I wish I could do that, but I know that I can't. In fact, that's one of my lies in my own life, is saying, oh, you can moderate it. And I'm like, no, you can't, Mindy. Stop lying to yourself. You know, you're not a moderator. And I have to tell myself that.
Got to talk back to yourself.
I do. I'm like, I'm arguing with myself because I am not a moderator. I wish I could be.
Yeah. I think I'm a moderator, but I would say, depending on the severity or the degree of harm that the thing might cause, I would be an abstainer on some of those things. You know what I'm saying? Like the more socially acceptable things, I might feel more free to be a moderator on.
Right.
But and that's kind of where I've moderated for the last 7 years and been great. And then I just crossed a line. And I think when I initially start something, I have to abstain to get some traction. You know what I mean? And then I can go to moderating. But sometimes I have to just cut it out to get started.
That's a good point, though. I mean, there's certain things in our lives that we would have to abstain from, that we would struggle with, and certain things that we'd have to moderate from.
Right. Even this chapter, like Mindy, you delved right into this chapter. And in my mind, I'm like, I hate habit chapters. And maybe this is from a moderator perspective, but I hate it when someone tells me I can't do something for some arbitrary reason. Maybe because they think I can't moderate it. I don't know. But it immediately gets my hackles up. And I happened to be listening to a podcast this week, Julie. I listened to it because I know you love the book Atomic Habits. And we've talked about that book. And I even checked it out at the library, could not bring myself to read it. And this is a podcast where they basically do a book for 2 weeks and then they talk about it. It's called By the Book. And I don't listen every week, but this book really caught my eye. But one of the things that they said in there, one of the girls, she hated the book, completely fell on her face, could not do it, deleted it from her phone. It was wrecking her life. And her husband said, you need to get rid of this book. He goes, it's ruining your life. And he said, there's no better way to drive you crazy than for someone to tell you to fix something that isn't broken. And the worst thing is if somebody tells you to track or measure something, that drives you over the edge and you become obsessive, and it's dangerous. And I thought, this is why I hate habit books, because I feel like this girl. I don't like the all or nothing. Get this habit out of your life. You know, if you don't completely eliminate this activity, you're a failure. Or you've got to track it. And like, I just immediately want to just shut down because I am a moderator and I feel like I should be able to learn to do it appropriately.
Right. And in all fairness, the author did spend a lot of time talking about real addictions, as in alcohol addictions, even marijuana or drugs, or, she did talk about some pretty serious addictions that had to be stopped before you could really move on with a lot of these other things. So I do think there's room for that topic,
oh, yeah. I'm just exploring, like, why might some people react differently to even the topic of getting rid of habits. And I think it all goes back to, some of that goes back to that moderator abstainer. We just approach habits from a different mindset.
Well, I do find that ironic, Marie, because you are like the guru of self-help books and you love things like that from my perspective, because I hate things like that. And I have always rebelled against any type of self-help. I'm like, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to live, things like that. And I don't want to think about it. And so it's so funny that this chapter I absolutely loved and delved into. And you're like, I can't stand it, because we totally took opposite positions on this. And we are typically different. Like, typically you're the one delving in. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to read the chapter. Like, I don't want to mark my progress. I don't want to write anything down. Like,
right.
Sounds like homework.
Yeah. Well, know that if you're listening to us, there's all different approaches to habits. I still think you can, I still got something out of this chapter, but I guess I would say, like, don't beat yourself up if you're just not all in.
When I texted you girls, I was like, this chapter's awesome. You were like, oh my goodness, what was she thinking? I don't see it.
Well, let me just go back to do you believe you can conquer your bad habits? Something Mindy said is, I really think the key is to convince yourself that there are really benefits to stopping it. You have to see what the benefits are and see the harm if you don't. And one of the things she talks about in this section is, initially, you may feel like it's a sacrifice to stop this habit. And I was just wondering if you had ever felt that way. Like, are you sad when you have to give up the chocolate cake or the scrolling or whatever it is? But she said to remember that true pleasures, really fulfilling things, don't come with hooks and heartaches attached to them. So you're not really giving up a pleasure, like to just reframe it in your mind.
Right.
Is that something that helped this month?
I loved the exercise that we're going to talk about here in a minute because of that. Because when you break it down and you do this exercise that we're going to mention, you learn how to argue for the better habit or the better way. And you actually have logical reasons that you come up with for your own problem. So to me, you have to learn how to have, how in a marriage they say, like, arguing's not bad. You just have to argue the right way. Like you have to argue in a way that you come to unity instead of arguing just to fight. I think that you have to learn how to argue in a better way for your better self. And she calls it the higher self, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Something she mentioned in the study guide, which I don't think either one of you have that, but she gave an example of, like, she said she and her husband have decided to watch their sugar intake and bread, and they were at a restaurant with a friend and they kind of told him that. And he said, oh, what a sacrifice. Like, that just must be terrible. I would hate that. And she said, it's really, and this is a term that we learned last month, was like, you get to assign an interpretation to every situation.
Right.
And instead of saying, what a sacrifice, how terrible that we don't eat sugar or bread, listen to yourself talk and say, but look at what we do get to eat. She just assigned it differently. Like, no, it's not a sacrifice because I eat this, I eat these things. And so it's just a simple shift in your thinking, because that's what this book is all about, that emotions come from our thinking, how we think about things. Those things really help me. It's just amazing. Just simple shifts can have big outcomes in your behavior.
And it has such long-term benefits to look at a situation in your own life from a positive perspective, and not what you're giving up, but what you're getting. Right. And so learning to talk about it or look at your behavior and I'm choosing this and it's giving me life. It's giving me thriving in this place that I have been like defeated. And so it is a total shift of your attitude and character. And I have so much more joy in my life when I am living from that positive perspective. Like I get to do this. I'm choosing this. And it's because of these reasons. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the 7 mighty steps to stopping bad habits, because this is helpful and this is the practical exercise that Mindy was talking about. But before we can explain those, we need to introduce a couple new terms: the lower self and the higher self. Our lower self pleads for immediate pleasure and self-soothing against the better judgment of the higher self, which whispers for long-term goals. There's a competition going on in your brain, and a victory over that lower self will completely change your life. This did make a lot of sense to me, that we kind of have like that base instinct, and then we also have our higher level of reasoning. And our base instinct, I picture like an infant, like they know what they want and it's a craving, and you're going to have to satisfy it or they're going to pitch a fit, and that's the only way it's going to be. And then as you grow, your higher reasoning starts to take over, and you can kind of talk to that lower self and reason with it. And usually when we are struggling with bad habits, we are allowing that lower self to rule over that higher self. So what are some of the arguments your lower self uses to get you to not listen to your higher self?
Oh, don't deprive yourself, Julie. You've got so much to be sad about already. Or just this one cookie is not going to make me gain weight. True, but 10, 15 might. Other people aren't depriving themselves. Why should I? Or I'm free to eat whatever I want. There's freedom in that.
Right.
Which is true. That's a partial truth, but not in any amount. I'm grieving. It's one of the few pleasures I have in life. It's the simple pleasures that count. It's the weekend. It's a celebration. We're with family or with, whatever. And this is all just on my food thing. There's lots of other areas, but I'm just focusing on that one area right now. Or I can handle it.
Yeah, like with scrolling social media, I might say to myself, well, I need to be informed. How am I going to have a conversation with so-and-so if I don't know these things? Or everyone needs to know what's going on in the world. Or I'm allowed to spend a little bit of time on myself. This is self-care, which is total opposite of self-care, if I'm honest. But yeah, a lot of the reasons center on that comfort. It's healing to me. I want it. I deserve it. Give me it. Right. Mindy, do you have any more to add? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No, I agree with both of you, like so much. And the only thought that I had was just like pretty much all the immediate emotions. One litmus test is if you don't still have those same happy emotions like an hour after you have indulged in whatever activity it is, then it's a lie. So you can kind of know, like, am I going to still feel like this is self-care in an hour?
Right. The author, Julie Gordon, points out that the lower self doesn't have thousands of arguments, but instead it tends to use the same 20 or so, which I thought was interesting and comforting to know that there are a limited number of things that we tell ourselves.
Right.
So let's talk about the 7 steps, and we're each going to take one and explain what the 7 steps are. So remember, these are the 7 mighty steps to stopping bad habits. So follow along with us in your mind. Just pick a habit and think, okay, let me walk through the steps, just focusing on this habit, whether it's watching too much TV, eating foods that you don't want to eat, scrolling through social media, whatever your habit might be. All right, Julie, you're up.
All right, the first one is the need to write out the detriments of continuing the habit and the benefits of stopping the bad habit. And she said the real secret is to not want it anymore. Until you don't want it anymore, you're not going to stop. And she used a really good example, like cocaine addicts. Obviously, cocaine is a pleasurable addiction, or people wouldn't be addicted. But it's also very costly. Like afterwards in an hour, Mindy, or I don't know how long it takes to come off of a cocaine high, but
I don't
there must be a feeling of rock bottom,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's getting to the point where you can see both of those and admitting to both of those. And I did find it helpful to write them out because you really have to come up with some compelling reasons at this stage.
I did like that she said a little bit later on that if you lose that argument with yourself and you jump back into your bad habit again, even after doing the exercise, it's because you have given yourself a reason that you didn't know yet or that you did not write down in this category. And so it is a process to figuring out what all of your excuses are, the detriments.
Yeah, you may have to add those as you struggle. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. What's number 2, Mindy?
Number 2, write out a proclamation of my best sane higher self. What I like about this, that she put the word sane in there. And I realized I couldn't necessarily argue for my higher self in the midst of the temptation to do the bad habit. I had to think about this before and decide before I was being tempted, if that makes sense. So this was really exciting, this particular part, because my detriments category was it's maybe 1/3 of the page of my journal. The benefits are 2/3 of the page. So it's amazing the benefits that I was coming up with. And I'll just give you guys some ideas. Joy and excitement, a clearer mind. Conquering this battle will give me strength and resources to conquer other battles that I face. I will have joy at living and doing things. I'll sleep better, more peaceful in my mind. Excitement for future activities, as I know I'll feel good. I'll age better. I'll be happier. It'll allow me to be more free to even encourage other people. I'll have a winning attitude instead of feeling like I'm losing and defeated. I'll have more confidence and freedom, and I will be able to go to sleep and wake up feeling excited about the future.
Who doesn't want those benefits?
I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That's your awesome category. Okay.
Well, the third step is to know the arguments your lower self will use to entice you to not follow your best higher self. Your lower self does not want to be instructed by your higher self. And so this would be the arguments that your lower self is going to use against you to not follow Mindy's best sane proclamation. And we've talked about a lot of those, but if you are telling yourself reasons why it's okay to break this habit that you've already decided in your most sane moment is really bad for you, then that's probably your lower self speaking in the moment.
Yeah, and it helps to have them written out. It really does, because you may not remember them or want to remember them.
Yes.
Julie, what's number 4?
Well, this was kind of a fun one. It says to be ready to talk back to your lower self. And I liked the self-talk because it was kind of like you're in a fight and you get to yell at your lower self and get it back in line and, say, no, I don't, you're lying to me, lower self. This is really the truth about whatever. So I found that to be helpful and kind of fun.
Mindy, number 5.
All right. Step 5 was pretty short and sweet, but it's also crucial. She says to be smoke and let the craving pass through. That is really just imagining like there's a dart of that temptation coming and that you just allow yourself to be smoke and imagine that dart just going straight through you. Like it's not going to affect me. And she doesn't really talk much more about that.
If you're a little confused by that, she does talk about that later, more with like offenses. Like if you're offended, she uses that analogy of letting it pass through you.
Okay.
So she'll come back to that.
Okay, step 6 is move into another room in your brain. And we talked about this in chapter 1. Moving into another room in your brain means to think about something else. We can only think about one thing at a time. So prepare ahead of time for the battle and decide what you will use to distract yourself and get yourself thinking about something else. And we mentioned in chapter 1 of the book that you can kick out the negative thoughts by thinking about something else. It can be something as simple as making a grocery list, or you can think about the things that you're grateful for. I mean, you can think about that party you're planning next month. Whatever it is, just get your mind off the temptation.
In all of this, she says, the battle of the temptation is fought and won in your mind. And so you really need the first 3 chapters to then kind of revert back to that stopping those negative thoughts. Because the negative thoughts is what then creeps in and makes us then have the activity of the negative activity. And I really like step 6 because you have to replace it. You can't just say, I'm going to not do that. You need to actually say, I'm going to do this instead. Otherwise, I feel like you leave yourself open.
There's a void and it's going to get filled with something.
Yeah, you don't know what to do with that. And you need to have alternate resources.
Right. Which leads right into Julie's step 7.
Yeah, that is the last thing, is to choose an alternative. Yes, you may need some dialing down of your emotions or self-soothing, but just make sure you're choosing something that's good for you, healthy, not harmful.
Right. All right. Well, how did this process work for you guys this month? And when you failed, were you able to analyze what went wrong? Noticed I said when you failed, because as Mindy said earlier, this is not a one and done.
Yeah, I love what Mindy's already said, that, like, you will fail, but she says it's because your lower self had a reason you weren't prepared for. So it's okay. You got to reframe it, rethink it. How am I going to refute it? Add it to the list, and hopefully you'll be prepared for that the next time. And there, things could still creep in, I guess, that you haven't thought of yet. So it's a trial, it's a process. And I really did enjoy it. I liked the self-talk, like, no lower self. You don't want me to indulge in just one cookie. You want me to have the whole package. Or you really don't care about my long-term goals. You just care about this one moment. Or, yes, I'm sad, but that's not going to help me in the long run. Like, I need to be healthy. I need to be my best during this time. And, she said your lower self does not care about destroying you and ruining you.
Right.
It's just about right now, those cravings, it's crying out for immediate gratification.
Yeah.
So I found that helpful and kind of fun. And it really did. It's such a simple thing. It's just an awareness. I don't think we are always aware that we even have a lower self that we can talk to.
Right.
I did like looking at this in a really positive light. She gives a lot of encouragement in the chapter. I love that she calls it self-discipline, kind of arguing for your higher self, listening to that little whisper that gives you the long-term goals. Like that's how you get a degree in college. That's how you face any uphill climb in your life, is by doing all the little things and committing to that daily. And that's how you get the big results. People don't just start there. One of the things that I underlined was self-discipline is not a harsh taskmaster. It is the secret sauce that takes you where you want to go. And high self-control correlates with productivity. And humans are built to be productive. And so I know that I appreciated that she talked about stopping bad habits. It can happen quickly or it could take some time. But basically, once you realize the benefits, you will want those benefits more than you will want that immediate comfort from whatever it is that you were doing. You will have a joy and exuberance to choose the higher self once you start seeing how that makes you feel. And honestly, you will see results the same day, because you'll have a freedom in your mind and an excitement for being able to win those little battles that you have fought for your higher self. And you can start celebrating those right away. So again, learning to see it in a positive view, celebrating and getting that joy and exuberance for the future. So I've enjoyed it. I have struggled, but I've recovered even in this past month. And daily in my journal, I'm arguing for my higher self, just changing the way that I think about those bad habits that I struggle with and I want to get rid of.
Well, it does sound like this chapter really worked well for you guys in naming your habits and laying them out there and what you want to do and what your goals are. But what are some of the alternatives that you came up for self-soothing? Like, what are you going to do instead?
Very first thing that popped in my mind was I need to take a nap. Like when I feel, and maybe that can be an avoidance thing for somebody. But honestly, like a 15-minute power nap is on my alternative list, because if I have been fighting mentally some battle, I just might need to zone out and try to just close my eyes and reset. So that's one of the things on my list.
What did you decide to do, Mindy, in place of your 7:00 malaise? I mean, did you come up with anything? Okay.
No, I've been watching basketball.
Okay.
That's good.
So one of the things, and I have not done this very well, but one of the things on my list is stretching. Just because I'm still in the living room. I still don't want to go outside. I still don't want to do any work. But if I can get off of the comfy chair and even move to the floor, then I can just kind of start stretching. And for some reason, stretching, like we all need to do it as we age anyway. It's so good for us. But it also is relaxing, and it's an active rest, if I could put it in those words.
I always say I'm going to do that. I never do it.
Oh, it's so good. Because then as soon as I go to workout class, I'm like, oh, I'm so stiff. I'm like, oh, I need to remember to stretch more, you know?
Put a sign on your TV, like above the screen, stretch.
Stretch. Watch TV, but stretch. Like just get down on the floor and start kind of, moving a little bit. But also hot water or tea at night would be just a really, especially if I'm snacky and I'm arguing against, running to food for comfort. I want to hold something warm. That is comfort in and of itself. And so choosing that instead of a snack is also just another practical thing. Because my hands need to be busy. Like I need to do something. So those are some practical tips.
Yeah. All right, Julie, what did you find as an alternative? How are you self-soothing yourself instead of eating that brownie?
Yeah, since mine revolved around food, I wrote tea in all capital letters, lots of tea. So like you, Mindy, I just have to have, when it's cold, I just have to have something warm. I have to have something in my hand, and I'd like to be putting it in my mouth. So I just drink a lot of tea, and thankfully, Marie gave me a whole canister of tea for my birthday.
I love it.
If you finish that by the end of winter, then you'll be doing good, Julie.
And just because I have other habits that are like isolation right now is a bad habit of mine. And so like getting out, going walking, being in nature, learning new things, reading, hobbies, like all these pleasures don't have negative detriments attached. And one thing I wanted to point out that she talks about in the study guide, I can't remember if she mentioned it in the book, but that the human connection is the best source of dopamine release in our brain. And that when we're isolated, we're already missing that. So isolation can be a setup for more bad habits because we're trying to fill that void, So I thought that was interesting. That just goes back to that we need people, we need each other.
Right.
It's a great way to change your mood.
Yeah. Okay, I'll save one of my self-soothings for my I'm a fan. But yeah, I do think it is important to identify ahead of time some alternative self-soothing measures, because otherwise you'll just fall back into the one that you don't want to be doing, because we're going to self-soothe. It's, you're not going to talk yourself out of soothing yourself in some form or capacity. This was a great chapter for just really analyzing, writing things down. We encourage you listeners to maybe play these steps again and just go through and write them down in a journal. If you want to get the book, it's called Happy School, Where Women Learn the Secrets to Overcome Discouragement and Worry by Julie Gordon. And like I said, we're taking one chapter a month, and there are still several chapters to go. So if you want to order it on Amazon, I'll put a link in the show notes and you can follow along with us the rest of the year. I know we've gotten some messages from listeners that have done that, and that's always neat to know that other people are doing this along with us. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
I'm a fan of a new movie on Disney Plus. It is my favorite movie right now, Encanto. And it is an animated movie. So, Marie, I know you're not an animated movie lover. However, the music in this movie is so incredible. Lin-Manuel Miranda is the one that did all of the music. And if you guys recognize his name, he's the one that wrote Hamilton. And so I didn't realize that. But when I watched the movie, I was like, this sounds kind of familiar. Like there's a couple of, songs in there. You watch the movie, and it's funny. I saw this TikTok video about how the first time you see Encanto, you're kind of like teary. You're like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like it's all about family. And then the second time, like you're up and you're starting to sing. And the third time, like you're doing the salsa in the living room. Like you I'm so invigorated by this movie. It is the cutest, sweetest, funniest, so creative. The lyrics, all the personality in this film is just so awesome. I love it. I have watched this movie probably 6 times. Oh, wow. Not sit, watch, but turn it on for the music.
Oh, I can't wait to watch. I've seen that on Disney Plus, and I just didn't know anything about it. So
I can't believe how many. I want to put it on like once a day. The music is so catchy.
Oh,
You'll have to get the soundtrack.
Yeah, I've seen that word mentioned on social media. I didn't know if it was a new band, an album, or what, but I'm glad to know that it's a movie.
It's an animated movie, Marie.
Yes. Well, that's great. That's really good. All right, Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
I'm a fan of a meal I made this week. It's kind of a conglomerate of things that I'm a fan of. But I had all our family here, and the boys were here for dinner one night, so they wanted some meat. So I went to Aldi, and I said, I'm getting this meal at Aldi. Like everything has to come from here. So I bought a skirt steak.
Okay.
We had Montreal steak seasoning, which, by the way, if you haven't used that, is amazing. And I had the smoky one, smoky Montreal. And I bought Aldi's tortillas, which were amazing. I bought their chips, which were $1, I don't know, under $2 a bag. When have you seen tortilla chips for under $2 a bag? And I thought, these probably won't be the best. I think they were some of my favorite. I bought their fresh salsa. And then I did peppers and onions. So I did. And then, we've talked about being a fan of the iron skillet. Well, I cooked my onions and peppers in an iron skillet and the skirt steak in an iron skillet, heavily seasoned with that Montreal seasoning. And it was delicious.
Oh, that sounds great.
So that's going to be my go-to boy meal now, because they in fact, I could have used 2 skirt steaks because they ate all of it.
Perfect.
Wow, Julie, that sounds delicious.
It was
I'm getting
so easy.
hungry.
Yeah. All right.
And it was as good as on the grill.
Okay.
The iron skillet just works great for that.
Awesome. Well, maybe I'll try making a skirt steak. I don't even really know exactly what one looks like, but I can read the packages to find out.
I know. I've never bought a skirt
and flat.
steak.
Okay.
And it has a grain. It's a tough cut of meat, so you have to be careful. You cut it against the grain, and that's what makes it tender, because it cuts all the fibers. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm a fan this week of a craft, and I was talking about how I'll just scroll social media out of kind of like not wanting to move on to the next task. What I really want to do is sit and relax, and I don't want to get up. And I feel like this is some time I could relax, but I should spend it doing something that is more beneficial than scrolling social media. So I went through my mental list of what hobbies do you like, Marie? What hobbies have you tried? What hobbies could you pick back up? And I rejected knitting because I've already been doing that and I was a little bored. I rejected cross stitch, even though I've seen like some cute kits at like TJ Maxx Home Goods, because not really wanted to pick that back up again. And I got to thinking, I thought, well, what about embroidery? I remember learning embroidery in elementary school in 4-H. I bet if I got a kit, I could figure it out. So I went on Amazon, and you guys, I got the cutest kit. It has 3 different projects. They include absolutely everything you need except for scissors. They include the hoop, the needle, all the thread, the pattern, everything. And it was for $15, $14.99. And the colors were really pretty. Let me see if I can get it and see if you can see it through Skype.
That's really popular right now. I like it.
Can you see
beautiful.
how subtle and pretty the colors are? And it's like botanical. And as soon as I saw it, I thought I could totally give this to my daughter, Abigail. I feel like it would fit right in with her house. If I don't have a place to hang it, she would. And they give you 3 different, like, similar patterns. And so every single one of them was something I would actually use. I didn't want a kit just for the sake of a kit. I wanted something that I would have a project at the end that I would actually use. So I will put a link in our show notes to that kit. If you have any embroidery knowledge whatsoever, and I'm telling you, I have this knowledge from like 3rd grade. Like, this is not something that I've tried as an adult. But the pictures are on the paper they give you, and you can follow along, or I'm sure you could watch a YouTube video, or you can just look at the stitch and imitate it.
I was going to say, are you expected to know the stitch? Did they just name it, or did they show you how to do it?
They name it and they show you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I would definitely recommend that. And what it allows me the relaxation time that I want, but I don't have to feel like I did nothing productive during that time. So I can still cuddle on the couch with the dog and relax. And I can even watch a show, but I'm also doing this, and it just makes me feel happy because I actually look forward to sitting down and doing it. Like, I wish I could just do it to my heart's content, like do it as long as I want to do it. But every time I get into it, I have to put it down and do something else.
Sign of a good craft if you don't want to put it down.
I know. I don't want to put it down. I just want to see it unfold. And so the pattern is on the cloth. Don't feel like you have to make up your own pattern. But it says all you have to do is rinse it at the end, and the pattern will disappear. And so it'll just be what you embroidered. So totally recommend that as a different way to self-soothe.
Oh, how fun.
Keep those hands busy.
Yes. So anyways, well, listeners, we would love to hear how you self-soothe. We'd love to hear if you've been working on any bad habits this month, if you've been reading along with us, what you found worked for you. You can come and find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast or email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing from listeners on any topic, and so feel free to contact us whenever you want to. Julie and Mindy, I want to hear just privately as time goes on, and even in our further episodes during the year, like how these habits are, working.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that'll be interesting for our listeners too. Like, you're actually going to maybe see if we hold ourselves accountable.
Well, I feel like this is kind of sticking with me because we mentioned previous chapters. Like, it's building, We're using things we learned weeks or months ago.
Right.
Yes. And I've been talking to friends more about it. I've gotten a couple of friends to buy the book even after this month.
Oh, good.
And because it's something that I could see wanting to, like when I'm going for a walk with a buddy, that we're talking about it. Like I want to talk about it more.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. All right, Julie and Mindy, we'll see you next week.
Bye. Bye, girls.
We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.